for me, anyway, I don't know about other people, but for me, I want to go back to the, kings will steal the subjects of other kings. All right, there's Shawnee, little Shawnee. Kings will steal the subjects of other kings. And not only do they steal the subjects of the other kings, they also steal all the lands, resources, hereditaments, tangible and intangible things that those such peoples held via their original kings that they are attached to, and so all of those are stolen by new kings. So this is what these guys get up to. I just wait to see if one or two others come in, because I'm going to go down the lines of the kings, the English kings and the New Zealand kings, until we get to the queens, which is where all the problems start. It seems to me the way that they seem to do it is that we'll have a king of one nation, and when another nation wants to set up a kingdom, so a virgin territory with no kings ends up getting invaded by all the religions, Muslims, Jews, Roman Catholics, and Buddhists as well. They will raid those territories and they will take over via religions. So, territories are held by religions or kings. That's what you get, either one of those two. Usually a king is attached to a religion, but it's religions or kings. So some territories, even to this day, are held by religions. The Islamic territories are all held by religious lines. The Buddhist territories are held by Buddhist lines. And then our countries, the English-speaking countries, we held our territories via kings. And these religions are consistently attempting to get rid of the kings so that they can take control, because the people that were under the kings got a lot of stuff that they didn't get under the religions, and the religions were very jealous of those things that we got and what we fought for. We fought hard, and the religions were always very jealous of that, because the reason why is because the people that were within their religions would look over at what the people under the kings had, there's Jesus, and they said, well, they've got all of these things, and you religious leaders are not giving, you want us to live in poverty, and you take all of that stuff and control it. So a lot of the people in the religion started moving over to put themselves under kings. So this has caused a great deal of, it's just this big battle that's consistently going on. But anyway, in 1843, when the St. Pauli ship was deceived and mutinied by the upper deck, mutinied the tween deck, and tricked them into relinquishing their German-Prussian king lines, and tricked them into going under a female line of Queen Victoria over in United Kingdom and India. So there's quite the deception that has gone on here. And then that was all set up through Maori kings and later Maori queens, to the point where we ended up being under, no, we did not, we were living in a world run by queens and not a world run by kings. And that is what is all the cause of all the chaos, is these queens. So we'll just go down today. I better get started. There's only a couple in. So I don't know who's in. I only can see one. But I'll just get started. with the kingly lines. But have a pencil and paper. So we're going to start here in, all right, so I'll just go down the lines with you. There. And I'll go down the lines. I don't think you need to see my face. All right. So going down the lines, we start at 1688 with King William of Orange, the Dutch King of Zealandia. And then he goes down to, the next goes down to Queen Anne of, the next one goes down, so we've brought in a queen. So William of Orange, who was married to Mary of Orange, who was English, right? And they, after that comes Queen Anne, who is of England and Scotland. Now, if you go and look at the ordinances of 1843, they made us subjects of England. We were not made subjects of Britain or of the United Kingdom. We were made subjects of England. And so that would have come under the English, Queen Anne, under the Acts of Union, 1707, after King William of Orange, 1688, came Queen Anne of Scotland and England, who signed the Acts of Union, right? And that is when it became Britain. They're still not at the United Kingdom, we're at Britain. So the next, I'm going according to their deaths, so I'm not going according to their births. I'm going according to their deaths. So from Queen Anne of England and Scotland, Acts of Union, 1707, that will go to King George the First, 1727 was his death. So Queen Anne's death was 1714. 1727 is King George's death, and he is the Protestant King of Hanover and Britain. It was the electorate of Hanover. So that was the electorate of Hanover and Britain, all right? Upon his death, King George the First death, 1760, we get George the Second. And he is, so these two kings, George the First is born in Hanover, George the Second is born in Hanover. Upon his death in 1760 is King George the Third. King George the Third is born in England. King George the Third dies in 1820. He had 15 children, 9 sons and 6 daughters. So, and of his children, in exactly his death of 1820, I've got to do a turn here, exactly his death in 1820, Queen Victoria is born in England. And it is at that time that the King's Bench Law Company splits and the Queen's Bench Law Company is established. And so that is under King James, and Queen's Bench Law starts under her upon her birth. So they knew upon her birth that it was going to be a woman that was going to take the reign, because as you see with Queen Anne, when they wanted to transfer the German kings over to England to establish the line, they needed a female. Well, when they wanted to establish a line in India and a line in New Zealand, they needed a female. So that female would go to Queen Victoria. So George III is born in England and he dies in 1820. And the next king after him in 1820 is George IV. All the kings now are born in England, all of them. So we now have George, but they're still marrying with German queens. So they're all born in England and marrying German queens. So George IV was born in England and he lived until 1830. So 1830, the first land deeds in New Zealand were begun in 1826. So 1830, George IV dies and he passes over to William IV. William IV is the one that supposedly did the Wakaputanka and set up the Wakaputanka flag. Now, we did have already kings, King Te Reo Anga Anga. We already had many kings within New Zealand. Each tribe had been established and each ruler of each tribe had already been established. And they all of them always knew that at some point they were all going to, oh, it's gone slow, has it? At some point they were all going to sit down and decide who was going to be the constitutional king. Nobody wanted to do it because once you became a constitutional king, you did not get to hold your divine right of kings. So those who wanted to remain divine kings and those who wanted to have one constitutional king, but no international nation, England, America, China, no nations would agree to do international agreements or trades with a country that did not have an individual king. And there's a very good reason for that. That is because one king would sign, one divine king would sign an international document on behalf of his area, and another divine king would come in and slaughter him and his family and say to the international people, we don't agree with that, we never signed it, and we're not agreeing to it. So it came to be that all international laws said you can have one king that can seal international documents on all of your behalf, and otherwise nobody will trade with you, nobody will send ships, nobody will allow you to import our people, which would be creating the labours. Nothing could go forward unless they got an individual constitutional king. So that was just the rule. You either did it or you didn't. You did it and you could trade and do all the commerce and conveyances and mortgages and all that, or you didn't do it and you could not have all of those things. So it's as simple as that. So we've got William IV, and then he passed away in 1837, and it ought to have gone to other sons of King George IV, but instead it was passed to Queen Victoria. She became queen. She was the queen of the United Kingdom. Britain, Scotland, Ireland, and all of that, and also the Empress of India. So she became the Empress of India, Queen Victoria, 1837. Now, she did not truly ascend. She was really not a queen. First of all, she was only 17, so not permitted to be a queen because she was in her minority. and she would have had a protector. And most nations would not agree to sign any documents with a protector, because once the queen or king reached the correct age, the king or queen would eliminate all documents created by the protector, because he was not really a king. So Victoria did not become of age until she was 17. In 1837, she was 17, and the age of majority was 21. And so it was not till 4 years later, which is 1841, when she was of the rightful age to be permitted to sign documents not only on her own behalf, but on international agreements and seals. But even then, that did not occur, because the Supreme Court of England was held by King William IV, and King William IV continued along the German Salic rules that it had to be a male, and they could not remove the Supreme Court of England. So they had to do that through New Zealand. So that's why they established a New Zealand kingly line at King Te Anga established that line. And that did not come to be, as I have told you, until 1843, when the St. Pauli ship was smuggled into Nelson from Germany under false pretenses, and, oh, it's bloody raining now, under false pretenses, and the Supreme Court Act under William IV of England was repealed within New Zealand. That was done in New Zealand, not done in England. And in 1844, Queen Victoria ascended to the Supreme Court of New Zealand, which established the Supreme Court of all the United Kingdom was established in 1844 within New Zealand, right? And the German line, 1771 through to 1851, went to Ernest Augustus of the Kingdom of Lüneburg and Hanover, which on George Gottfried's oath, he is listed as being from the Kingdom of Lüneburg, Hanover. So George Gottfried Sixtus is the conduit that not only was he on the original ordinance, which provided the transition from King William IV Supreme Court to Queen Victoria Supreme Court. Upon the death of Queen Victoria, it's George Gottfried who needed and he was still listed, he was listed as belonging to the Kingdom of Lüneburg and Hanover. And he was a very old man, and it was he that brought in the new King Edward the Seventh, who became the King of United Kingdom and India. So George Gottfried Sixtus did that. And since they have gone and corrupted the lines, I suspect that we, the children, the great-great-great-great-grandies of Gottfried, have the right to petition the court and reset our line back under the German king where we will belong, because of all the deceptions that have occurred in New Zealand against our people. So that's going to be a big thing coming up. So now we've got Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom and of the Dominions and Empress of India, and we've got King Ernst Augustus of the Kingdom of Lüneburg, Hanover, right? So Queen Victoria passes away in 1901. Now we're going to bring in the Maori kings. So up until then, up until 1858, we had King Te Rao Anga, and from King Te Rao Anga, it went to King 1860, went to King Potato Pharaoh was the next king. And then we're going to start these kings in 1894. Maori kings, we're going to, but there's like 3 or 4 kings before him. So 1894, which is just a few years before Queen Victoria's death, just 6-7 years before Queen Victoria's death, we have King Tawhio in New Zealand. King Tawhio, and then King Tawhio dies in 1894, and Queen Victoria dies in 1901. Then Gottfried Sixtus brings in the new king. We now have the next king after Tawhio. So we've got 2 kings here. We've got King Tawhio and we've got King Edward the 7th of United Kingdom and India. No Germany. Germany's done, right? After that, so during that time, then we've got after that we've got King Mahuta Tawhio. King Mahuta Tawhio is the son of Tawhio. And we've got King George the 6th, who is the son of Edward the 7th. During their time, the 2 Boer Wars occurred. So we've got Mahuta Tawhio and George the 6th of the United Kingdom and India, both of them going to the 2 Boer Wars under, they both went to those Boer Wars under the, now it depends, did they go to one Boer War with the 8-point flag and one Boer War with the 5-point flag? Because there seems to be a great deal of dispute about these 2 flags. We know that the second Boer War holds the 5-point star, which the Maoris are saying stole the 8-point star flag. Well, I'm not so sure about that. But anyway, so Mahuta Tawhio and King George the 6th of the United Kingdom and India go to the 2 Boer Wars. Mahuta dies in 1912 before World War I, but George the 6th dies in 1936 after World War I. So after Mahuta Tawhio, we've got Rata Mahuta. Rata Mahuta goes to the war with George the 6th, and George the 6th dies in 1836, and so we've got, and Rata dies in 1933, so Rata Mahuta and Edward, the Rata Mahuta and George VI both go to the World War I together. And then in 1936, King Edward the Eighth abdicates, and King Rata Mahuta remains. And I think King Rata dies in 1933. I might have to go back and look at this a bit, but anyway, I'll go and fix that up for you. So anyway, the next king on the Maori line is Koroki Rata Mahuta, and it's Koroki Rata Mahuta who goes to the World War II in 1944. So I'll go back and look at that because I think I might have changed it a wee bit with the Maori Kings, and because the other ones I did all of their deaths, but I might have done their births, and so I'll have to go back and just redo that a wee bit, right? But anyway, right up until, so it's when it gets to Edward the Eighth, Edward the Eighth refuses to fight against Germany. He stands up. I think this is clearly what happened. Edward the Eighth turned around and he says, he's looked at these two Boer Wars, right? He's looked at these two Boer Wars and he's looked at this World War One, and he has seen something wrong here. And he has said, I'm not going to fight. These wars are planned many years in advance. And governments know many years in advance. All governments know many years in advance. Part of the rules of war is that their country is going to be in a war at some point in the next few years. And so they're told to prepare. Everyone's told to prepare. Negotiations are held. But everybody knows that if the negotiations fall through, the war will occur. So everybody prepares two scenarios. One scenario is the negotiations will prevail and there will not be a war. The other ones know the negotiations fail, there'll be a war, and they must prepare for the worst. So they prepare as if there's going to be a war, and then they hope that there isn't going to be. And Edward, he knew this, and he would have known all about the two Boer Wars, and he would have known all about the World War One. And he stood up and he says, no, I'm not going to war against Germany. And he abdicated and left England. And at that point, that's why, that is truly the reason why his brother, Elizabeth's father, was stuttering. The reason why he was stuttering all the time, because he knew that he wasn't a true king, and it was difficult for him to speak the lies that he was having to spin to the public. And so that's why he was stuttering, because that's what you do when you want to tell a whole bunch of not truths to millions of people. You will do things like stutter, your words will splatter out your mouth and you can't speak properly. Well, this what occurred with Queen Elizabeth's father. So now we're going to start there, that we've got two kings. We've got the abdication of Edward, and then we've got the death of Rata Mahuta. Rata Mahuta. I think you can just see me down there. You can hear me, I think. I've got to do my things. So, next thing. So we've got Kuroki Rata Mahuta, who's running World War II together with Queen Elizabeth's father. And so that's where we're going to go back and restart the lines. We've got King George VI, who took over from his abdicated brother, who was not a true king. He actually was not a king. You might as well just call him a head of state or, a statesman, an important figure, similar to Prince Andrew. But he was not a king and never could be a king until the death of his older brother. That is the fact. It was possibly most likely thought that that Willis Simpson would do what they always did to kings, would ply him with alcohol, keep him drunk, keep him partied up, drunk and partied up, and having lots of fun and dancing and singing, and keep him well occupied with sexes and all of these things, because everybody knew that he was the true king, and he knew it too. He absolutely, but you know what? For him to speak out would have been his absolute death. So everybody most likely waited around and hoped that Edward would have an early death. And if he did have an early death, well, that would have been fine, because George VI, Queen Elizabeth's father, was already in position, ready to take the realm. So, but Edward did not die. He continued to live right through until 1972. So the whole time, 1852 right through to 1972, Edward, in fact, was the true and rightful king. And that is the fact. So this is why, the reason why things went awry is because King George VI, who was not a rightful king, died in 1952. And Kuroki, who was a rightful king of Rata Mahuta, he died in 1966. However, here is the deception. Kuroki was the oldest son of Rata Mahuta. However, Kuroki had 4 siblings. So Mahuta had 5 sons. Now, Taipu Mahuta passed away in 1924. The next in line for the throne was Hori Rata. You know, we used to always make jokes about Hori. What did we used to say? Because the Maoris used to call us bullheads, and we used to call them Horis. And I always thought that this word Hori was a derogative name. We just, it meant poor person. But I think it was a jibe at the fact that the royal bloodlines of Hori were denied their position. How this came about is because Tia Huia, the oldest sister of Rata Mahuta, forbid Hori's rightful ascension to become a king. Same thing happened over in England. So they both sides of the water forbid King Edward to be king because he refused to fight against Germany in a Second World War. And Koroki, his older sister, Tiahuia, forbid the rightful king, Hori Mahuta, to become the king. And so the position was given to Koroki's daughter. When it should have gone to his brother, it went to his daughter. And also, when King George VI passed away, it should still rightly have been retained by Edward, but instead it went to Elizabeth, who was not the rightful queen, and neither was Dame Atairangi Kahu. That's her name. Atairangi Kahu was not the rightful queen. So the two correct and rightful kings were Hori Mahuta and King Edward. I forget which number, I think it's Edward the 7th or Edward the 8th. So those were the two rightful, lawful Those were the two rightful and lawful kings, but instead we ended up with two women. Queen Elizabeth II and this Atairangi, oh look, there's the monks. This Atairangi Kahu, she became a dame. She did not become a queen. And the reason why she did not become a queen was because she could not become a queen as long as any of Rata Mahuta's 5 sons or any of their 5 sons' children were alive. That married queen, they call her married queen, but she wasn't, she was just a dame. That married dame could not ascend to the throne. Now, that Dame Atairangi, her daughter was Princess Tapuia. And so that's what I've got for those lines. So you've got those 2 lines. Well, King Edward the 8th was still the rightful king over both of them until 1972. Hence, in 1972, the whole royal system fell apart in New Zealand. So they had to wait until King Edward's death because he did not have any children, and then they waited for Queen Elizabeth's death, and we have King Charles was the first rightful king since 1936. King Charles was the first rightful bloodline king of United Kingdom and India, not of Germany, and they had destroyed all of the German kings, and luckily that King Edward the 8th had assisted the German kings and put some of them into safety, made sure that all of their stuff was held in safety, and he did a lot of things for the German kings, King Edward did. And so in 1972, that got set right over in England, but did not get set right over in New Zealand. So the last piece now, because I've got to go to work and I'll be late for work, so I'm not allowed to be late to work today because I've got classes. But the last bit that I would tell you, during the World War, I'm not sure if I think it must be World War II or perhaps World War I. I'll have to go and look at my relatives. But anyway, during one of the wars, the entire South Island, which was owned by the Deutschlandians under the German king, King Ernst Augustus, which was called New Munster. And so that was all called New Munster right through until 1849. That was called New Munster. And so during 1849 was still King George III. His line was in power right until 1849. So that was New Munster, and remained New Munster until 1849. During the war, all of the children of any of the native Germans who either were inhabitants for hundreds of years pre-1901, or they were the peoples of the grandchildren or children of the people of the St. Pauli ship, they were all ordered to go to war, and many of them were half-castes at this point. Well, all the half-castes and all the German sons refused to go to war, but if they did not go to war, all their lands, shares, stocks, bonds would be confiscated and held in the public trust. And the ones that refused to go to war were put on Symes Island and another island, and they were forced to build the roads of New Zealand. There were rapings, churches were burned down, people, British and Americans, were breaking into their houses, raping the German woman, and half German Maoris got a lot of abuse as well. And then a lot of them went into hiding. The half-caste Maoris went into hiding. Tapuia set up a secret place for them. She gathered them all up under the pretense, I believe it's a pretense, that no New Zealand Maori ought to fight in the white man's war. But in fact, we'll talk about these wars tomorrow, but in fact, these were half-caste Germans, and they actually did not want to fight because they owned all of New Munster against the North, and they did not want to fight against Germany because they would have been fighting against themselves to lose the area of New Munster. Well, Tapuia, who is the daughter, Tapuia is the daughter of Te Huia. Te Huia is the sister of Rata, who forbid Hori from becoming king, right? And Tapuia is the daughter of her. And Tapuia gathered up all the half-caste German Maoris, and then in the area, because the government was not able to find them, they went into hiding, and they hid in the mountains, they hid all over the place. She came forward and tricked them, said to them, we want all of you together here, and I'm going to protect you. And then the government of New Zealand went in and found them and beat them up bashed them up and forced them to go to war to Germany, and if they did not go, they went into the labour camps, and they were forced by conscription. Now, you want to go and check out the Australian conscription. Many of those soldiers in those wars were in those wars under conscription, which meant that they did not voluntarily go. There are thousands upon thousands that were forced to go to war against their will because they did not want to go to war against Germany because their bloodlines were all of German peoples. And so Tapuia had done that, and after she had done that, she ended up getting 500,000 acres of land and hundreds of thousands of dollars in government money to support her causes, because they all knew that the New Zealand government and her had set up the half-caste German Maoris and tricked them into going to one place where the government was able to go and attack them and put them into the prisons. So that is the end of our story today, following those kings and queens, which we want to get to the queen of today. So we'll talk about that again, maybe on Monday. I won't be back tomorrow, but Monday it'll probably be. Okay, fine.